My wife swore there was nothing special about that camping trip, but 15 years later, one accidental sentence from her best friend changed the entire story. And ever since then, I never stopped wondering what really happened that night at the lake. My wife S and I have been together for almost 20 years. We got together in high school and basically never separated after that. We grew up together, became adults together, built our entire lives side by side. Like every long relationship, we had rough patches and arguments, but never anything serious enough to truly threaten what we had. I never cheated on her, never even wanted to, and she's always told me the same. Except for one story that still bothers me to this day. I call it her camping secret. At first, it honestly sounded harmless. Just two young students going on a cheap camping trip together. But the strange part wasn't the trip itself. It was how defensive my wife became afterwards. Every year, my wife and her best friend, V, would go on a little trip together. Sometimes a city break, sometimes something outdoors. Back then, they were both around 20 years old and still students, so money was tight. One summer, they decided to go camping in the Ardennes in Belgium. If you've never seen the Ardennes, it's beautiful. Forests everywhere, rivers, hiking trails, little villages. The perfect place for young people looking for adventure on a budget. They chose a small, quiet campsite far away from the big tourist campgrounds. No giant pools, no entertainment, none of that stuff. Just nature and people around their age. This was before smartphones and social media took over everything, so during the trip, our only contact was usually one text message every evening. She'd tell me about kayaking, mountain biking, hiking, campfires, normal vacation stuff. Then came the last night. And looking back now, I think that final text message is the exact reason this story stayed in my head for so many years. That evening, she texted me, saying they had met some guys around their age at the campsite. She said everyone was getting along well, and they all had planned to go swimming together at a night at a nearby lake. They were going to drink some beers, maybe some wine, and just enjoy the final evening before heading home. At the time, I was honestly a jealous person. I remember staring at that message and immediately feeling uncomfortable. I didn't like the idea of my girlfriend drinking with random guys in the middle of nowhere at night, but I also knew how she reacted whenever I became too protective. She often said I could be suffocating in the relationship sometimes, and I didn't want to start a fight through text messages. Besides, deep down, I knew something else. Even if I objected, she was still going to go, so I said nothing. Now here's where the story starts becoming strange, because the next day, I asked one completely normal question and got a reaction that made no sense. The following day, I picked her up at the train station. At first, everything seemed normal. We hugged, kissed, talked about the trip. Then naturally, I asked about the swimming night, and immediately her whole mood changed. "There's nothing to say about it," she snapped. "We just went swimming and had some drinks. That's it. No reason to be jealous." The reaction genuinely shocked me. I hadn't accused her of anything. I hadn't started an argument. I simply asked how the evening went. But suddenly it felt like I had touched a nerve I wasn't supposed to touch. I remember feeling confused by how defensive she became so quickly. So I eventually just let it go. And over time, I mostly forgot about it. Or at least I thought I did. Years later, one random barbecue conversation brought the entire story back to life and changed the way I remembered that night forever. By then, my wife and I had already moved in together. One evening, we invited her friend V over for a barbecue. Just the three of us, eating, drinking and laughing and telling old stories. The atmosphere was great. The girls started talking about all the trips they'd taken over the years together. London, Paris, Amsterdam, Malta. One memory after another, and then suddenly V burst out laughing and shouted, "Do you remember our camping trip? That last night we started skinny dipping with those guys and then..." And right there, she stopped talking. Because she suddenly realised I was standing there too. Not just her and S, me. What happened next completely blindsided me, because suddenly the version of the story I'd heard for years no longer matched reality. I immediately looked at my wife and said, "You never told me you went skinny dipping. You said there was nothing to tell." My wife instantly turned red. Then she tried to save the situation. "No," she said quickly. "It was only V who got naked. I kept my bikini on." But then V immediately contradicted her. "Not at all. It was your idea. You didn't even want to put your bikini back on because it was still wet from kayaking. You literally said that that was the perfect excuse to swim naked." Then V suddenly stopped herself. She laughed awkwardly and said, "Okay, I'll stop now before the real trouble starts." And honestly, that sentence haunted me ever since. Because what exactly did she mean by real trouble? That's the question I still can't answer. If the skinny dipping itself was harmless, then why hide it for years? Why deny it immediately? Why become defensive the first time I asked about that night? And why did V suddenly stop herself like she almost revealed too much? At that moment, my emotions completely exploded. I felt jealous, embarrassed, angry, but also weirdly fascinated, because suddenly my imagination just started filling in the blanks that maybe didn't even exist. I ended up leaving the house for hours just to calm down. When I finally came back home, V had already gone home and my wife was asleep, or maybe pretending to be asleep. And honestly, this is the part that still bothers me most after all these years. Not what I know happened, but what I don't know. Ever since that night, every time I try bringing up the camping trip, both of them react the exact same way. Dismissive, annoyed, defensive. "We went skinny dipping, so what?" And maybe they're right. Maybe that's truly all it was. Maybe it was just harmless fun between young people on vacation. But then, why does it still feel like there's something missing from the story? And that's what I can't shake. Because sometimes what stays with people forever isn't betrayal itself, it's uncertainty. The feeling that there was a version of events that you were never allowed to hear. And honestly, after 20 years together, I still don't truly believe my wife cheated on me. I really don't. But I do think something emotional probably happened that night. Maybe flirting, maybe attraction, maybe boundaries got blurry for a few hours in a way that she later regretted. And maybe the real secret isn't that she swam naked. Maybe the real secret is that she enjoyed the freedom of that moment more than she wanted to know. And after all this time, I still don't know whether I'm just being paranoid or whether my instincts picked up on something real. Because if nothing truly happened, why avoid the conversation completely? Why not just laugh about it openly after all these years? That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the skinny dipping, not the drinking, not even the guys, just the silence around it. The feeling that the story was carefully edited before it even reached me. Maybe nothing happened at that lake except a few drinks and some harmless fun. Maybe my wife really did tell me the truth. But after 20 years together, I still can't shake the feeling that there's another version of the story that I was never supposed to hear. So now I genuinely want to ask you, do you think I'm overthinking this? Or do you think there was something else more to that camping night that she ever admitted?
I still don't really know how to explain what happened that weekend, but it started off like any other camping trip we'd done before. Nothing unusual, Nothing dramatic, just me and my boyfriend heading back to the same spot we always went to, setting up our tent and settling in for a quiet couple of days away from everything. At least that's what I thought it would be, because right next to us there was a group I couldn't ignore even if I had tried. They had this massive army-style tent, and from the moment we arrived, you could hear them. Music playing, people laughing, bottles clinking constantly. They were loud, chaotic, the kind of group that completely fills a space without even trying. Part of me found it a bit entertaining, if I'm honest. Still, I didn't think much of it at first. Then they noticed us, and that's where everything started to shift. One of them came over and invited us to join them for drinks that evening. Just a casual invite, nothing strange. They were friendly enough, and after a bit of hesitation, we ended up going over. I remember thinking at the time, maybe this could actually be a fun change, something different from my usual quiet nights. And at first it really was. The group were easy to talk to, full of energy. Everyone seemed to fit in straight away. One guy in particular stood out though. His name was Nick. He had this way of keeping conversations going, always asking questions, always trying to pull people in. And I noticed he kept making an effort with my boyfriend too, trying to include him, trying to get him talking. But my boyfriend just wasn't there. He barely spoke, didn't really engage, just sat back looking uncomfortable, almost like he didn't want to be part of it all. And that's when I first felt that tension without fully understanding it. I didn't want to make a scene, so I just suggested we go back to the tent earlier than planned. But even that short walk back changed the mood completely, because suddenly my boyfriend started making sarcastic comments about how friendly I was being with everyone, especially the guys. At first I tried to brush it off, but it didn't stop there. It turned into an argument, quiet, tense, and I remember thinking that this isn't like him. But I also didn't push it further. I just let it go because I didn't want the whole weekend to spiral. I didn't know then that it already had. The next night made everything worse. We went back over again hoping it would be different, but it wasn't. He started drinking more than usual. As the alcohol kicked in, so did his mood. He got sharper, more defensive, more openly irritated. And the worst part was, it was happening right in front of everyone. You could feel the atmosphere change. People noticed, people went quiet at certain points. It was uncomfortable in a way nobody wanted to acknowledge. I kept trying to smooth things over. I included him in conversations. I told the group how proud I was of him. I tried to redirect things, make it feel more normal again, but nothing worked. He just kept pushing back with the sarcasm and frustration, and eventually I realised there was no fixing the night anymore. That was the second time I remember thinking, we need to leave, so we did. I took him back to the tent, and I could tell he was really drunk by that point, barely steady, barely aware of how he was coming across anymore. But even alone, it didn't calm down. He was still harsh, still snapping, still creating tension where there shouldn't have been any. And that's when something in me just shifted. I told him I didn't want to be around him like that, and I left the tent, just like that. Out into the night, needing space, needing air. I needed distance from everything that had built up over the last 2 days. And that's when I saw Nick again. He was still by the fire, and the first thing he asked me was if I was okay. I didn't plan anything in that moment. Didn't even think ahead. We just talked. At first it was simple conversations, nothing more, just me trying to get out of my own head for a while. But the night didn't stay simple. We had a couple of drinks, and the conversation kept going longer than it should have. And I remember thinking, this feels easier than everything else tonight. That's the part I didn't expect to matter, because things escalated from there. We kissed. It wasn't planned, it wasn't discussed, it just kind of happened in the moment that felt like it didn't belong to anything else going on around us. And for a few seconds I didn't think at all. I went back to the tent briefly after that. My boyfriend was completely out cold on the air mattress, just passed out from the alcohol. Barely moving, barely there. And that should have been the moment everything stopped, but it wasn't. Because I left again. I went back to Nick. And that's where everything crossed the line I can't undo. We slept together that night. I was drunk too. Not completely gone, but definitely not thinking clearly. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something I considered properly. It just unfolded and I didn't stop it. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't thinking about consequences in that moment at all. Not my boyfriend, not the situation, not what it meant, just the moment I was in. We ended up together for the rest of the night, and I didn't even think about how close everything was, how easily it could have been heard, how wrong it actually was in the bigger picture. I just didn't think. And that's the part that stays with me, because morning came faster than it should have. I woke up before my boyfriend, went to freshen up, acted like everything was normal. And when he eventually came out of the tent hungover and groggy, he didn't question anything, he just assumed I'd been up already. Nick and I never spoke again after that. We left earlier than planned that morning, with me saying I wasn't feeling well. We were supposed to stay another night, but I just couldn't. And now the strange part is, we're still together, my boyfriend and I. And from the outside, everything is fine, really fine actually. Better than fine, most of the time. But he has no idea what happened that night, and I've never told him. Sometimes I still think about it and wonder what it says about me, that in that moment it felt as easy as it did.
Everyone's got a story. Some are just better at hiding it than others. Subscribe for more real stories every Thursday and Sunday between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. BST. And remember, trust is earned in small moments and it's lost the same way.